The champagne glass slipped from my fingers and shattered against the marble floor. Laughter erupted around me, sharp and cruel, echoing off the restaurant's high ceilings. My fiancé Pete stood across the table, his face flushed with wine and confidence, his arm draped casually around his coworker's chair. He'd just called me boring. In front of everyone. His exact words were, "Yvonne's great, but let's be honest, she's a little too safe for my taste. Too predictable." The room went quiet for a heartbeat, then someone laughed nervously. Pete grinned like he'd told a harmless joke. My cheeks burned. I forced my lips into a smile, the kind that hides a breaking heart. I grabbed my purse, pushed my chair back with shaking hands, and walked toward the exit. My heels clicked against the floor, each step louder than the whispers behind me. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of them. But as the glass doors closed behind me and the cold night air hit my face, one thought burned through my mind. That was the night my engagement ended. And my silence, too. My name is Yvonne Pierce. I'm 29 years old, and I work in marketing for a mid-sized firm in Portland, Oregon. I'm not flashy. I don't post selfies every day or party until dawn. I like quiet dinners, good books, and building campaigns that actually mean something. Pete used to love that about me. He called me his peace, his safe place. He said I grounded him when the world got loud. But somewhere along the way, the ground turned boring. Steady became predictable. And my quiet strength, the thing I was proud of, became the reason he looked elsewhere. I'm not here to paint myself as perfect. I made mistakes. I stayed too long. I ignored the signs. But I'm also not here to apologize for who I am anymore. Pete taught me that some people need chaos to feel alive. I needed something else. I needed respect. And when he took that away from me in front of a room full of strangers, something inside me shifted. I stopped shrinking. I started remembering who I was before I tried to fit into his idea of enough. The proposal happened on a rooftop in downtown Portland. It was September, 2 years ago. The city lights sparkled below us like scattered diamonds. Pete had set up candles, rose petals, a violinist playing softly in the corner. When he dropped to one knee, my heart felt like it might burst. He told me I was his forever. He said he couldn't imagine life without me. I believed every word. I cried into his shoulder as he slipped the ring onto my finger, a simple band with a tiny diamond that caught the light just right. It wasn't expensive, but it was ours. That night, lying in his arms, I thought I'd found my person. The man who saw me, truly saw me, and chose me anyway. I replayed his words over and over. You're my peace, Yvonne. You make everything make sense. I didn't realize then that peace can bore people. That some men need storms to feel important. That the thing he loved most about me would eventually become the thing he resented. At first, the digs were small. Pete would tease me about my clothes. You always wear black. Don't you want to stand out? He'd joke about my hobbies. Reading again? You're like an old librarian. I laughed it off. Couples tease each other, right? But his tone started changing. The jokes got sharper, more frequent. He began comparing me to other women. His coworker Sabrina, especially. Sabrina's so bold. She pitched this wild idea today and everyone loved it. Or, you should see how Sabrina dresses. She really commands the room. I tried to adjust. I bought brighter clothes. I forced myself to be louder at his office parties, cracking jokes that didn't feel like mine. But it was never enough. Pete's eyes still wandered. His compliments dried up. And slowly, quietly, I started believing what he was implying. That I wasn't interesting enough. That I was too plain, too safe, too forgettable. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. Someone small. Someone apologizing just for existing. The late night started 6 months before the dinner. Pete claimed he was networking, building connections, climbing the ladder at his architecture firm. I wanted to support him. I packed him lunches, texted encouragement, waited up even when he came home past midnight. But something felt off. His phone was always flipped over now. He showered the moment he walked in. His energy was different, jittery and distant, like he was somewhere else even when he was sitting right next to me. One night, I saw a message flash on his screen. Sabrina. Just her name, no preview. My stomach twisted. I asked him casually, "Who's Sabrina?" He barely looked up. "A colleague. She's working on the downtown project with me." His voice was flat, like I'd asked about the weather. I wanted to press, to demand answers, but I swallowed the questions. I told myself I was being paranoid. That love meant trust. That if I just stayed steady, stayed supportive, everything would be fine. I was wrong. That dinner was supposed to celebrate Pete's promotion. He'd been made junior partner at Peterson & Co., and he wanted to take his team out. He asked me to come, and said it was important. I wore my nicest dress, a simple navy piece that Pete once said made my eyes shine. But when I arrived, I felt invisible. Pete barely acknowledged me. He was too busy laughing with Sabrina, their heads bent together over some inside joke. I sat at the end of the table, nursing a glass of champagne, forcing polite smiles at people who didn't know my name. Then Pete stood to make a toast. He thanked his team, his boss, and his luck. And then, with a grin that didn't reach his eyes, he gestured toward me. And of course, my fiancé Yvonne. She's great, really. But let's be honest, she's a little too safe for my taste. Too predictable. The glass slipped. It shattered. The room blurred. I stood, grabbed my purse, and walked out. Behind me, I heard Pete's voice, half laughing. "Come on, it was just a joke." My apartment felt like a tomb. I locked the door behind me, dropped my purse on the floor, and stood in the dark for what felt like hours. The silence pressed against my ears. I replayed his words over and over. Boring. Safe. Predictable. Each one a knife twisting deeper. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to call him and demand an apology. But instead, I walked to my bedroom, sank onto the floor, and pressed a pillow against my face. Then I screamed into it. Once. Twice. Until my throat burned. The tears came next, hot and angry, soaking through the fabric. I cried for the proposal on the rooftop. For the nights I stayed up waiting for him. For every time I made myself smaller, quieter, less, just to keep him comfortable. When the tears finally stopped, I sat up and stared at my reflection in the dark window. My mascara was smudged. My eyes were red. But something else was different. My jaw was set. My hands had stopped shaking. I wasn't broken. I was done. Tara showed up the next morning with 2 bottles of wine and a box of donuts. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just wrapped me in a hug and said, "I'm staying until you eat something." We sat on my couch, and I told her everything. The jokes. The comparisons. The dinner. Tara's face darkened with every word. When I finished, she set down her wine glass and looked at me hard. "Boring," she said, her voice sharp. "Yvonne, you built campaigns that saved companies. You keep that man's entire life running like a well-oiled machine. You are not boring. You're competent." And he couldn't handle it. Her words cracked something open inside me. I realized I'd been carrying his shame like it was mine. I'd believed his version of me instead of my own. Tara leaned forward. "You know what boring people do when they get dumped? They sit around waiting for an apology. You're not boring, Yvonne. So stop acting like you are." That night, I took off Pete's ring and put it in a drawer. I didn't know what came next. But I knew I wasn't going back. 3 months passed. I threw myself into work, pouring everything into my campaigns. I stopped checking Pete's social media. I stopped replaying the dinner in my mind. Slowly, the hurt started to dull. I wasn't healed, not completely. But I was different. Quieter, maybe. But also sharper. More focused. I started taking risks I'd been too afraid to take before. I pitched bold ideas in meetings, ideas I once thought were too much, too risky, too me. My boss, Helen, noticed. She called me into her office one afternoon and said, "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You're on fire lately." I didn't tell her about Pete. I didn't tell her about the nights I still cried in the shower or the mornings I woke up feeling hollow. But I also didn't apologize for my work anymore. I stopped prefacing my ideas with "this might be stupid, but..." I just presented them. And people listened. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing at full height. It was terrifying. And it was freeing. Helen called me into her office on a rainy Tuesday in November. She was grinning, which was rare. "Yvonne, I have news. We're partnering with Frost and Ainsley Group on a major urban development project. They need someone from our team to lead the marketing and design narrative. I'm recommending you." My heart skipped. Frost and Ainsley was one of the most prestigious architecture firms in the Pacific Northwest. Landing a partnership with them could change my career. "When do I start?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Helen slid a folder across her desk. "Next week. You'll be working directly with their lead architect, Daniel Frost. He's brilliant, a little intense, but fair. This is your chance to shine, Yvonne. Don't hold back." I left her office in a daze. My hands were shaking, but this time it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. I didn't know it yet, but that meeting with Daniel Frost would change everything. Not just my career. My entire life. Daniel Frost wasn't what I expected. When I walked into the sleek glass conference room at Frost and Ainsley the following Monday, I expected someone loud, commanding, maybe even arrogant. Instead, Daniel was calm. He stood when I entered, shook my hand firmly, and gestured to a seat. He was tall, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair and sharp gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Yvonne Pierce," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "Helen speaks highly of you. I've reviewed your portfolio. Impressive work." I felt my shoulders relax slightly. "Thank you. I'm excited to collaborate." We spent the next 2 hours discussing the project, a mixed-use development designed to blend residential, commercial, and green spaces in the heart of Portland. Daniel's vision was ambitious, human-centered, and emotional. And he wanted my input. Not as an afterthought. As a partner. When the meeting ended, he walked me to the elevator. "Helen was right about you," he said. "You see the story behind the structure. That's rare." I smiled. "Thank you." As the elevator doors closed, I realized something. For the first time in years, someone saw my work before they saw my limitations. 2 weeks into the project, Daniel asked me a question that stopped me cold. We were reviewing my presentation for the client, a proposal centered on creating emotional connections through design. I was halfway through my pitch when Daniel held up a hand. "Yvonne, stop." I froze, heart sinking. Had I messed up? He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Why do you always present like you're apologizing for your brilliance?" I blinked. "What? You say maybe and I think and this might not work. But your ideas are solid. Stop hedging. Own them." His words hit me like cold water. I realized he was right. I'd spent so long making myself smaller, softer, less threatening, that I'd forgotten how to stand firm in my own ideas. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and practiced. I said my ideas out loud without qualifiers. "This will work. This is the right direction. This is what we need." My voice shook at first. But by the 10th try, it didn't. I whispered to my reflection, no more apologies. The next presentation was different. I walked into the client meeting with my head high, my notes organized, my voice clear. I didn't apologize. I didn't hedge. I simply presented. The room was silent when I finished. Then the client, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret, leaned forward. "This is exactly what we've been looking for. It's fresh. It's human. It's bold." Daniel caught my eye across the table and nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. After the meeting, he pulled me aside. "That was exceptional, Yvonne. You commanded that room." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. I just stopped apologizing. "Good," he said. "Don't start again." A week later, Daniel made me lead designer on the project. It was the biggest opportunity of my career. And for the first time, I felt like I deserved it. Not because someone handed it to me. Because I earned it. That night, Tara and I celebrated with cheap wine and expensive takeout. "To Yvonne Pierce," she said, raising her glass. The woman who stopped dimming her light. I clinked my glass against hers. I was starting to believe it. The bombshell dropped during a strategy meeting in early December. Daniel was reviewing the competitive landscape when he mentioned the other firm bidding for the same contract. Peterson & Co. is our main rival. They've been aggressive, but their designs lack emotional depth. We have the edge. My blood turned to ice. Peterson & Company. Pete's firm. I kept my face neutral, nodding along as Daniel continued, but inside I was reeling. Of all the firms in Portland, it had to be his. Fate had a cruel sense of humor. After the meeting, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel. I could tell Daniel. I could recuse myself. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was anger. Or maybe it was the realization that this was my chance to prove, once and for all, that I was never the problem. Pete was. I didn't tell anyone. Not Daniel, not Tara, not Helen. I just smiled, went home, and worked harder than I ever had in my life. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about winning. Right under his nose. I didn't seek Pete out. I didn't need to. I knew we'd cross paths eventually. The architecture and marketing communities in Portland weren't that big. So I focused on my work. I refined every detail of my proposal. I stayed late, tweaking presentations, polishing narratives, making sure every word, every image, every concept was flawless. Daniel noticed. He started trusting me with bigger decisions, asking for my input on design elements, on client strategy, on everything. We became a team. Not just professionally, but in the way we thought, the way we approached problems. It was seamless. One evening, as we packed up after another long day, Daniel looked at me and said, "You know, Yvonne, I've worked with a lot of talented people. But you're different. You make everyone around you better." I didn't know what to say. So I just smiled and said, "Thank you." But his words stayed with me. Because Pete had made me feel like I made everything worse. Smaller. Less. Daniel made me feel like I made things whole. The industry gala was in mid-January. It was one of those events where everyone who was anyone in Portland's architecture and design scene showed up. Helen insisted I attend, saying it was important for visibility. I almost didn't go. But Tara dragged me to a boutique and helped me pick out a dress, a sleek black number that fit like it was made for me. When I walked into the ballroom, I felt different. Confidence. Like I belonged. I was talking to a potential client when I saw him. Pete. He was across the room, laughing with Sabrina, his hand on her lower back. My stomach dropped. But I didn't look away. I held my head high and kept talking. A few minutes later, Pete saw me. His smile faltered. He said something to Sabrina, then started walking toward me. My heart pounded, but I stayed calm. "Yvonne," he said, his voice uncertain. "You look different." I smiled, cool and unbothered. "No, Pete. I just stopped dimming." He blinked, clearly thrown. Before he could respond, Daniel appeared at my side. "Yvonne, ready for the next round of introductions?" I nodded, turning away from Pete without another word. I didn't need closure from him. I'd already moved on. The boardroom was silent as I finished my presentation. I'd spent weeks perfecting it, weaving together architecture, marketing, and human experience into a narrative that wasn't just about buildings. It was about connection. About creating spaces where people felt seen. The client board sat quietly, taking it in. Then it was Peterson and Co.'s turn. Pete stood at the front of the room, confident as ever, clicking through slides. His ideas were flashy, impressive on the surface. Lots of glass, lots of steel, lots of buzzwords. But they felt empty. Hollow. Like they were designed to impress, not to matter. When he finished, the room clapped politely. But I could see it in their faces. They weren't convinced. Daniel leaned over and whispered, "You've got this." The board deliberated for 30 minutes. When they returned, Margaret stood. "After careful consideration, we've decided to move forward with Frost and Ainsley Group." Applause erupted. Daniel shook my hand, his grip firm and warm. Across the room, Pete stood frozen, his face pale. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. Winning was enough. The win went public within days. A local business blog ran a feature on the project, with a photo of Daniel and me shaking hands in front of the building mock-up. The headline read, "The creative duo behind Portland's most ambitious project." Tara texted me a screenshot with about 50 fire emojis. My phone buzzed with congratulations from colleagues, clients, and old friends. And then, late that night, Pete called. I stared at his name on my screen for a long moment. Then I let it go to voicemail. He called again the next day. And the day after. I never answered. Whatever he wanted to say, I didn't need to hear it. His opinion didn't matter anymore. A week later, Tara told me she'd heard through mutual friends that Peterson and Co. was struggling. They'd lost 3 major contracts in a row. Sabrina had started distancing herself from Pete. His shine was fading. And the quieter I stayed, the louder my success became. Silence, I realized, was the most powerful response I could give him. Daniel invited me to dinner on a Friday night in February. He said it wasn't about work. Just dinner. I almost said no. The lines between professional and personal were starting to blur, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that. But something in his voice made me say yes. We went to a small Italian place on the east side, the kind with dim lighting and soft music. Daniel ordered wine, and we talked about everything except work. About our childhoods, our dreams, the things that scared us. At one point, he looked at me across the table and said, "You make everyone around you better, Yvonne. Including me." My throat tightened. "You've said that before." "Because it's true." He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "You haven't seen it yet. But you will." I didn't pull away. For the first time in over a year, I let someone see me without armor. Without the walls I'd built to protect myself from being hurt again. It was terrifying. But it was also the first moment I felt like I could breathe again. Pete's firm continued to spiral. I heard through the grapevine that Peterson and Co. had lost another major client in March. Their reputation was taking hits, and Pete's name kept coming up in industry gossip. Not in a good way. People were questioning his judgment, his leadership, his ideas. Sabrina stopped showing up to events with him. Rumor had it she'd transferred to a different department. Pete tried calling me again. I blocked his number. He tried emailing. I sent it to spam. He even showed up at my office once, but security didn't let him past the lobby. Tara asked me if I felt vindicated. Honestly, I didn't feel much of anything. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Pete had become irrelevant. A footnote in a story that was no longer about him. My life had moved forward, and he was stuck in the past, trying to rewrite a narrative that didn't need him anymore. That realization was more powerful than any confrontation could have been. By April, Daniel and I were inseparable. Not just at work, but outside of it. We'd grab coffee in the mornings, walk along the river after meetings, stay up late talking about projects and life and everything in between. It wasn't rushed or dramatic. It was easy. Natural. Like we'd been moving toward each other all along. One night, we were sitting on his apartment balcony, overlooking the city lights. Daniel turned to me and said, "I don't want to mess this up, Yvonne. But I need you to know. This isn't just about work for me. It hasn't been for a while." My heart pounded. I looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, and realized I felt the same way. "It's not just work for me either," I said softly. He smiled, reaching for my hand. We sat there in silence, fingers intertwined, watching the city breathe below us. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Not because someone completed me, but because I'd completed myself. And Daniel was just someone who saw that and loved it. In June, I was promoted to creative director. It was a position I'd never imagined holding, but Helen said I'd earned it. My leadership had transformed the team. Projects were more collaborative, more innovative, more human. Daniel threw me a small celebration at his place. Just close friends, good wine, laughter that didn't feel forced. Tara pulled me aside at one point and said, "Look at you. Leading teams, designing futures, falling in love. Pete would lose his mind if he could see you now." I laughed. Good thing he can't. But the truth was, I didn't care anymore what Pete thought. He'd been a chapter in my story, but he wasn't the story. I was. And I am writing my own ending now. One where I didn't apologize for taking up space. One where I built things that mattered, with people who respected me. One where boring meant steady, and steady meant strong. That night, Daniel and I stood on his balcony again, and he kissed me. Soft and certain. And I kissed him back. Because I was done running from happiness. The corporate conference happened in September, nearly 2 years after that awful dinner. I'd been asked to speak on a panel about turning rejection into reinvention. It was a full-circle moment I hadn't anticipated. As I arrived backstage, I saw him. Pete. He was in the hallway, clutching a folder, talking to a small group of investors. He looked tired. Disheveled. His suit didn't fit quite right anymore. Our eyes met. He froze mid-sentence. I didn't. I just nodded, a polite acknowledgement of a stranger, and kept walking. There was no anger left. No hurt. Just indifference. He'd become what he feared most. Irrelevant. I stepped onto the stage a few minutes later, and the auditorium was packed. Daniel was in the front row, smiling up at me. Tara was beside him, giving me a thumbs up. I took a breath, looked out at the crowd, and began. 2 years ago, someone told me I was boring. And I believed him. Today, I'm here to tell you that the most boring thing you can do is let someone else define your worth. Daniel introduced me before my speech, standing at the podium with that calm confidence I'd come to love. "This project wouldn't exist without Yvonne Pierce," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "She's the woman who taught us that grace and strength can coexist. That quiet doesn't mean weak. That boring is just another word for brilliant when you're too insecure to appreciate it." The crowd erupted in applause. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them back. I walked onto the stage, took the microphone, and looked out at the sea of faces. Somewhere in the back, barely visible, was Pete. He wasn't sitting. He was standing near the exit, arms crossed, watching. I didn't speak to him. I spoke past him. About resilience. About redefining yourself on your own terms. About the power of walking away from people who make you small. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. People stood. Cameras flashed. And Pete slipped out the back door, unnoticed by everyone but me. I watched him go. And I felt nothing but relief. The final scene of my story isn't dramatic. It's quiet. I'm standing on Daniel's balcony again, months after the conference, watching the Portland skyline glow in the evening light. The city feels different now. Softer. Kinder. Or maybe I'm just different. Daniel wraps his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asks. I smile. How Pete called me boring because I made his life too easy. He needed chaos to feel alive. I needed peace. And now? Now I know that peace builds empires. He laughs softly, pressing a kiss to my temple. We stand there in comfortable silence, watching the lights flicker on across the city. I think about the woman I was 2 years ago. The one who let a man's cruelty define her worth. The one who shattered a glass and walked out with her head high, even though her heart was breaking. That woman is still here. But she's stronger now. She's learned that boring girls don't burn bridges. We redesign them. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't fire. It's building something so beautiful that the people who doubted you can't look away. I smile, squeezing Daniel's hand. This is my empire. And it's just getting started.